remind you, if you didn't already hear, that Steve Treat, one of our most popular speakers, will be with us next Sunday to speak about transforming relationships. Really taking any relationship in our life and taking it to another level by strengthening our communication and how we interact with others. I want to also just highlight to my right over here are icons that the women have made during the women's retreat that ended this morning, and it was over at Pendle Hill. We had, I believe, 20 women who were present for that. It just sounds like a magnificent time that they spent together. And so afterwards, if you have a moment, please take a little time and look at each of these extremely creative icons. This morning we're going to talk about the results of the survey that all of you were kind enough to participate in, and we had well over 200 people, I believe, filled this out. I've had a chance to look through virtually all of them carefully, and I'm going to begin by asking Michael Smith, our Minister of Music, who helped to put the survey together with Liz Costello, our Associate Rector, to share kind of the overall results of the survey. And then I'm going to ask Liz to share a little bit of a synopsis of what took place 2 weeks ago when we had Table Talk, where people had a chance around the table to share their own thoughts about what is most meaningful to them in worship, and if they were to reconstruct it in any different way, how they would do that. And then I will kind of clean up and read some of the individual comments that people have made. I can't summarize all of them because it takes well over our entire time to do that. But to give you a little feel of what your peers are saying about worship here at St. Thomas, and then kind of wind it up with where we might go from here. So, Michael Smith.
So I will say that almost as soon as the survey went out, Liz and Emily and I sort of began to realize that, just like in any survey, there are flaws in the methodology. And there are questions we wish we might have asked differently, or things we might have put next to each other to help us get a better idea of the analytics. But it's a starting point. And we hope that you received the chance to take the survey as what it was, which is our genuine want to give you a voice. And if that voice is a voice that says, everything's fine, don't change a thing, that's your voice. And if that voice is a voice that says, I hate this, blah, 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 then that's your voice too. And in seeing all those responses together, it gives us a greater picture of what the gathered community says. One of the flaws in the methodology, and I just really don't know any way around this, is that, as Merrick said, 266 people completed the survey. My hunch is, and this sort of bears up, is that those people are people who come to church. And so when we ask questions about why don't you think people come to church, it tends to be a bit skewed. So we'd be interested in hearing your thoughts individually, later on after this or at some other time, about how you think we can reach out to the 1,000 or so people who consider themselves members of St. Thomas but do not regularly attend worship. What I've given you on this handout, and I apologize for not having enough to go around, if you'd like your own copy, see me afterwards. I can either email it to you or print out a copy for you. It's basically some of the qualitative stuff that we can measure from the survey. And so if you're looking on the side of the pie charts, the first qualitative question was age range, and we realized there's a flaw in that as well, because by categorizing only 60 or above as one category, and I'll admit it as my own, and it does come across as ageist, and I realize that. So my apologies for being insensitive to that. We probably could have busted out that category a little more, and it would have given us a better picture of our total population. But it just gives you an idea of the age of the respondents. The next chart I think is really interesting. How often do you attend worship? So basically, almost 85% of the people who filled out the survey say they attend weekly or 2 to 3 times per month, with once a month or a few times a year being very, very few. And then the top 2 barriers, I realized that these got cut off. Personal relationships is the first one. Need to maintain personal relationships, perhaps people who feel like Sunday is their only day to have family time or visit with friends. And the schedule, kids, activities, karate, soccer, lacrosse, horseback riding, basket weaving, you name it, right? Other things. Some people felt that the service times themselves were a barrier. And then personal travel, or for work, people who travel for business, that sort of thing. On the reverse side, here's another question that I wish I would have done a little differently. We asked, which worship services have you attended? Many people chose more than one, because many people do float between the services. I wish we had asked a follow-up question that said, which worship service do you attend most often? So we could have had that as a comparison point. And then this did involve a little bit of counting on my part, and it's not, there's around, because many people answered multiple things in the question, or things that could be broadly construed as these categories. But sort of the top three things in what part of worship means the most to you was the sermon, and some of the answers had qualifiers, like short or meaningful to daily life, or those sort of things. The Eucharist, or receiving communion, and the music and the choir. Those three were the most. And then we had almost 100 sort of individual answers that were all different and reflect, I think, a great deal of piety on the part of the congregation. Things like silence, prayer, kneeling for confession, having a chance to sort of unplug and engage with the community. So this is just sort of a snapshot of the things that we could present in graphs or bars. And I think Liz will, first of all, does anyone have any questions about these responses or any insights? Okay, Liz will talk about 2 weeks ago and sort of give a recap of that process.
Hello. So who was here a few weeks ago when we had the big circle talk? Just raise your hand. Wonderful. So I invite you to add in if I miss a comment or a theme. But for those of you who couldn't be there, we wanted to have an opportunity to gather around a circle and small group tables, small circles and a big circle, and have a conversation about 3 questions. 1, what makes formation irresistible? 2, what makes worship irresistible? And 3, help us solve this challenge that we have with competing needs, resources, and desires and wants. And so to kind of go over the first one and kind of share it back with a larger group, we talked about in a larger circle, what makes formation irresistible or meaningful? And the things that I heard over and over again, and please chime in, just, stand up and shout it out if I missed something, but for formation, there was both a desire to learn something. People really wanted good didactic, lessons about whatever said topic, and they also wanted the ability to have small group discussions, because what I kept hearing over and over again is the desire to share in community and share about how Christ is present in each other's lives. So say you picked a topic on how do you hear God's voice. So that was a topic. To learn something about that, how the church has thought about that, and then to actually have small group discussions around what does it mean for us to hear God's voice in our own lives. I heard that was really important. I also heard it was really important to learn something new. There's a desire that the content is actually more important for some people than the speaker. So while the speaker can be important, that the content in which we discussed was super important. So we want to follow up on that and see if we can't capture, even today, we've got index cards for you, which we'll pass out later, topics you'd like to be covered for the coming year or 2. And we'll kind of look through these index cards and pick, the top topics and try to weave them in to the formation schedule for next year. Another thing we heard is people really missed intergenerational interaction in formation time, right? So how do we, with these 3 different worshiping communities who have these different intersections, create a natural natural space, a natural time where we all could be together and learn about God and catch up on each other's lives. So that's kind of a snapshot of what I heard. Anybody in the room feel like I'm missing something?
What do you mean by formation?
I mean, this hour right now, this is, when we gather together to be more deeply formed in the faith. So Sunday school for adults.
I would also add the 2 discovery hours that take place.
Right, and so then when do we plan the discovery hour? So discovery hour is our Sunday school for our children and youth. So when do we plan those so that we could maybe have simultaneous ordination Sunday school classes going on at the same time and have them those opportunities to all meet as a big group, right? Do some fun intergenerational stuff. Did I miss anything for the folks who are there? Did I miss anything? Cool. Yeah.
Would it be an idea to have everyone write down a friend, a family member, or someone that, an acquaintance who might be willing to do a lecture or do a group for free to save money or whatever?
Sure, we'll take that information too. That would be great. Thank you. So yeah, whenever America's talking, I'll excuse myself and then I'll pass around these notepads and or note cards and pens. And then the other question we engage is what makes worship irresistible? So why do you come to worship? What makes it meaningful for folks? And again, it kind of, we got to explore some of the findings that the survey found. And I don't think there was really anything different from the survey results. So worship, beautiful music, quality of sermons, time of sermon, that sort of thing was important for people. The other question we engaged, which is the one still kind of before us as a community to discern, is given the fact that we have 3 services, right? We have all these different needs and wants, and how do we make a schedule and organize ourselves on Sunday morning that's the best for the most people, right? Knowing that we have these competing interests and competing wants, and it's hard to make everybody happy. But what's the best option for us? And so that is that we have a Right One service that is 8 o'clock, right? Any 8 o'clockers in here? Thank you for coming back, 8 o'clockers. We've got some folks in here who are family table. Any family table people in here? And then, which says something about who can come to this forum. And then we have 10 o'clockers, which I think is us all basically, minus the 2 8 o'clockers. So how do we figure out a way to be together throughout the year? Could we combine worship services, say, 4 times a year? That's something we discussed as a group. And then how do we deal with the fact that we have 2 clergy and 1 minister of music? We don't have a, an organ scholar who could maybe help Michael out. We don't have a 3rd clergy like he used to, so running concurrent services at 10 o'clock is no longer the easiest choice. So we kind of explored that, and frankly, there were so many different answers that I won't kind of go over them all, but it's something that we're still wrestling with as a staff, is what would this schedule look like? So with that, Beth.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do we know why people go to the 8 o'clock and the 10 o'clock? Is it the hour of the service or the liturgy of the service?
We didn't ask that question. We did hear, though, to that point, that people do want to be off the hill, so to speak, by noon, right? They have this need to be off, a lot of people, not everybody, have a need to be off the hill by 12 or 12:30. Michael?
I'll just add, just from skimming through the individual surveys on my own, I think it's a combination. I think some people who attend the 8 o'clock like it because it's very early and they can go and have church and then get on with the rest of the day. Some people prefer the traditional language of the Right One service and having just a quiet, contemplative, meditative, traditional service.
So now that we're kind of all on the same page about our process up to date, I'd like to invite Merrick up here to lead us in our next conversation.
Put that on the screen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael and Liz, for sharing that feedback from the survey, and thank you to all of you who took time to fill it out. It was very helpful. There were some very insightful comments, and it gave us a lot of good direction. In terms of the areas I saw filled out most often, the focus on sermon being very, very important to people, the quality of music, and receiving communion. And then after that, worship that reflects diversity, or multi-generational worship, friendship/companionship was circled, but not quite as often as sermon quality of music and receiving communion. And under what makes for a good Sunday forum, there were a lot of people who actually did circle nationally known speakers. I think somewhat less on some of the small groups, but again, that was kind of a lot of difference on that one, and hard to really register anything as a critical mass. In terms of what does great worship look like, some of the individual responses included thoughtful or thought-provoking, mindful, reflective. Another person wrote joyful, moving, spiritual. Another person wrote meaningful sermon, inspiring music, gorgeous flowers. Flowers were highlighted several times. And of course, I think we have perhaps the finest flower guild that can be found. I'm going to bring a new book that Leslie Purple has produced showing different floral arrangements. We'll try to highlight that in church in the next few Sundays, but it's just stunning what they've done. Now they've got it in a book so people can look through and choose arrangements for weddings and other services. A message enhanced by music, flowers, and fellowship. Music, fellowship, sermons relating to everyday issues and concerns. Constantly that came up, the idea of sermons that were relevant to everyday issues. Excellent music, multi-generational, strong community, well-attended, compelling sermons. Another person wrote, entering church, friendly people welcoming, sermon, meaningful, no more than 10 minutes. Several comments about brief but good sermons. Lots of music, common ritual, shared reverently. Great music, nugget of spiritual truth to take home and think on. And in this culture where we're bombarded by so much information, I think people are looking more for, put it in a nugget, don't overwhelm me with too much. Reflective, calming, soothing. Time for thought in a fast-paced world. Bonding time with the Lord. I think that spoke for many people. Music, sermon that helps me think and focus. Involvement of youth. Prayer, music that is inclusive and diverse. Scripture, personal, timely sermons. Families, youth participation. Communion, diversity among the congregation. Another person wrote, I have a Catholic background, so the way of St. Thomas is currently great. And I would have to suspect that about half the people who have entered our church in the last 2 decades have come to us from a Roman Catholic upbringing. I think if you leave a space after, a place after worship, in whatever form it took, one should feel better than when he or she arrived. Another person wrote, a thoughtful, meaningful experience with God. Inclusive community, genuine feel of the sermon, and how it ties in with Scripture in everyday life, struggles and accomplishments, welcoming feel. Another wrote, it is inspiring, calming, reassuring, comforting, at times even funny. A feeling of serenity. Leaving worship feeling a little more at peace with myself and the world, whether this be achieved through song or sermon or lesson. Focus, passion, relevant to today. Praying, singing, praising, loving one another. Someone wrote, good liturgy, or good worship is something that follows the liturgy. So being creatures of habit, we Episcopalians love the nature of our worship, which has a very coherent structure. Relevant, concise sermon reflecting current events, issues of social justice. That one I thought was interesting because others have spoken about that. Either I saw two kind of spectrums here. One that actually came under a concern for why I don't worship. Someone saying because social justice is not raised up enough. And others saying don't get too political. And I think that's the tension that we live in. I'll be honest, as we move more towards the city, I think there's a sense that people want to address social justice issues more. And as we move from here out further in the county, which is more conservative, stay away from that which is political. And that includes for many social justice. Topical sermons that are not too long, hymns that are engaging, fulfilled and unwasted time with good, powerful sermon. Engaged, well-attended, great sermon and music and energetic. Reflective sermon, communion, spiritual harmony and communication. A time for meditation and inspirational words from the speaker. Great worship looks however you want it to, however you feel you can connect with God most. Someone else wrote music in the Anglican tradition, opportunity for reflection, fellowship, meaningful preaching that is relevant to modern issues. Still another, the preaching must be biblically centered, which it always is at St. Thomas. Preachers must not be afraid to actually teach theology and make important points. The sermons and readings are the whole service to me. Everything else is secondary. So it's interesting that some people it's the sermon, others it's music, others it's flowers, others it's the structure of the liturgy, others it's this calm, peaceful sense. We all bring different things and different needs to our worship. Loving, uplifting, solace. Song, celebration, prayer, unity. Opening our hearts to God in our darkest hour. Great music, upbeat attitude of staff. Mass in less than 1 hour. Joyful music, inspiring, in parentheses, and brief sermons that aren't too political. All ages together. Creative prayers, heartfelt readings of Scripture. And the reading of Scripture came up again and again. Eucharist, variety of music, focus on Scripture, sermon. Last few, formal involvement, passion, choir, the soul of the church. A good message, hope for the church. Classical music, high service, meaningful sermons. Sermon, family time music. Full, attentive, on time, engaged, traditional. Honest reflection, open dialogue of the importance of God. Congregational participation, attention to God, respect, compassion, great music. So now, barriers to worship. What are stumbling blocks that people have? One wrote, we travel out on weekends, our parents live out of town, also our children are out of town. Personal relationships, family, as barriers were often the #1 issue of people having struggles with being here on worship. Accessibility, audio, mobility, vision. We heard a lot about the audio system and that being a barrier to people being able to worship. Of course, the time when we did this, we had some significant problems with our audio. We've tried to correct those. I think we've made a lot of progress. Scheduled/weekend commitments is a big conflict for many, the #1. Audio for hearing loss. Out of town half or more of the year for one person. Travel and we're away for part of the fall. Own a home and family business in Cape May, spend half of the year there. Others wrote work schedule, health issues, not a morning person. I thought that was an honest answer. There are times where I felt that way myself. Hearing properly. Someone wrote very specifically, please fix the loop. That's the loop sound system that connects with hearing aids. I can't hear well. Lecture very bad for hearing. Can't hear today. Someone wrote, as I mentioned before, lack of addressing issues of social justice. In other words, if something's going on in the country this week, and I get to church and there's a sermon that leads about prayer, the Bible, but it's not about what happened this past week in our nation or in the world, why would I come? Main obstacle is having, and by the way, if you're not aware of this, Karl Barth, one of the great theologians of the last century, said that a preacher must preach with the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other. Having just gotten the recent bill for the Philadelphia Inquirer and seen how much it's going up in price, I think I'm going to have to read that online now. Main obstacle is having something for children to do during talks. Personal crisis/health crisis. Getting here, I don't drive yet. Finally, someone wrote, sometimes I just need a day to sleep in. Don't we all? What is your favorite hymn? There were some great choices. All Things Bright and Beautiful, Lift High the Cross. And someone said, I remember carrying the cross as an acolyte and feeling such strong emotions with this song. Holy, holy, holy. Faith of our fathers. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee. Swing low, sweet chariot. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. Be thou my vision, beautiful words and melody. Reminds me that God is always present. Battle hymn for the Republic. Morning has broken because it celebrates all of life and nature. Someone wrote, too many to mention. Hyperdole, that's the melody. It makes me happy. Praise my soul, the King of Heaven. Mendelssohn, Rock of Ages. O God, our help in ages past, eternal Father, strong to save, I am the bread of life. Those are 3 hymns, by the way. Because they are just evocative of a certain spirit. More jazzy songs. I like the sound of more upbeat songs and then slow songs. Or maybe it was then slow songs. It was a little hard to figure that out. The Navy hymn, Dad's Funeral. Just a dash, Dad's Funeral. Someone wrote, every hymn is my favorite. We've got to find that person. Here I am, Lord. Gives a sense of focus on God. On eagle's wings. Feast of victory, dash Easter. Old rugged cross. Come thou long expected Jesus, dash clear, simple, poetic lyrics and tune. Amazing grace. Many people wrote that down. And then this person wrote, dash, I get very emotional when I hear it. Another wrote, I remember it as a child. Someone wrote, and this is honest, don't like to sing. The kind of love, the King of love my shepherd is. What a friend we have in Jesus. How great thou art. Christmas and Easter hymns. And I checked to see how often that person came to church. They came rather regularly. So they just love those special hymns. I want to walk as a child of the light. Ave Maria. I like the ones sung by the choir. What part of worship means most to you? Sermon came up time and time again. Gospel and homily, dash to hear God's word and then always learn a new interpretation. I thought that was significant. I mean, I got a great deal out of Liz's sermon and the sermon that the women of the church kind of shared their collective wisdom during the wonderful retreat. And it gave me new insights. I thought it was brilliantly captured what it was like to be the life of a fisherman, part of a stable industry. And this is the only profession you had ever known, and you were good at it, and it was reliable what you did every day, what it was like to walk away from that. Communion, music, sermon, friendship, personal time to pray. And these are what parts of worship mean most to you. I've always looked forward to the sermon when the liturgy was changed they had it in 1987, it was 1979, it became less dear to me. The Lord's Prayer, the lessons, the sermon, readings, choir, the lessons, sermon, communion. Quiet moments of reflection. And we've tried to add some more of that pausing before we say the confession. Pausing after the sermon is over. Pausing after lessons read. Just to have those little brief moments of silence. So quiet moments of reflection, dash, those moments when I'm away from everything, in parentheses, phone, etc. Although, how often have we heard a phone disturb a worship service? But it's that time when we get away. Praying, kneeling for communion, Eucharist, the sermon, the choir, and how formal everything is. There is an interest in this parish, I think, on traditional, formal, and it is when some people say, why don't the younger families come to worship with us? They find that a little more informal nature, allowing a child to be a child, and not having someone look sternly at a child, that's helped them in a lot of ways, is to have a little breathing space. The sermon and the interpretation of the week's readings, the complete service in the road, choir and familiar liturgy, prayer and music, prayer, all different contributions, the celebration and quietness of the service. Now, what makes you want to attend the adult forum on Sunday? People wrote nationally known speakers. That was circled a lot. Most important, someone wrote interesting topics and interesting speakers. Someone else, the topic that is discussed or presented. It's good to keep up the breadth of topics at the adult forum and varieties of activities for adults and families. Someone else wrote, the topics is what interests me, does not matter who presents it. My hunch is it would. but we want to have, I think the key what we're hearing is significant topics with someone who can faithfully present it or get us going in conversation. Someone wrote, like to watch on YouTube. We're trying to record as many of these as possible so you can pull them up and watch them. Hopefully so people continue attending regularly. But if you're out of town, if you're sick, you can connect with what went on in the forum. I like a mix of hearing all those things and keeping it interesting. Someone else, the subject matter. Someone else, the topic of interest, the environment, science, and religion as examples. And someone else wrote, right now my children aren't interested, so I can't do this during the children's program. And finally, another said we attend 8 a.m., which means returning to church after leaving for the adult forum. It's just not worked with our schedule. And so we see Bill as the one person giving the 8 o'clock service, along with Josh, two of you. But it's hard to integrate that into the format. Pat, my apologies to you, Pat. So free. Now, what else would you like us to know about worship and music at St. Thomas, and the following things were said? It would be interesting to see why certain hymns are performed week to week. Are they chosen to reflect the, and then it said, it was hard to read, of the week.
Lessons.
Always closed lessons. Would like to see more involvement with parishioners, having them participate in the service. We come for the liturgy and music, and you do a great job of these. The chance to be in community with others. Someone else was very specific. Please do not bring in guitars, drums, etc. Excellent as it is. Kids choir, it's very nice. Someone else wrote, choir is too far away. Dark lectern. And by the way, Michael's been doing a very fascinating job. He sometimes seated the congregation with members of the choir. He's had 4 in the balcony at the beginning of the service throughout Epiphany. Very creative, Michael. Kudos. Ongoing sound issues. Music is great. Do more paperless music in the main church. Again, a very specific comment. The most important part of the service to me is the sermon. 11th century mystics and quotes from obscure writers are hard to relate to. I want to hear a sermon that makes a reference to the gospel, but ties it in with current events so that we can use biblical/Jesus' wisdom to make sense of our present day world. A good sermon would make me jump out of bed on Sunday morning. We need this to keep energized and inspired all week long. Someone else said, sermon offertory. When will the sound system be fixed this time? Question. I hope we can hear this. I'd like to participate more, but I'm not sure how. It seems like other people know how, or know what's happening and how to help, but I'm not sure. And Liz Costello did a wonderful worship training session this fall. We've already discussed doing one again next fall. And please seek out Liz if you'd like to be more involved in liturgy. There are many roles. We'd love to have you participate. Please find a way to include all generations in worship. Hate it when it is segregated. Someone else just wrote, love it, exclamation mark. Let's not have too many obscure hymns. Prefer write 1 to write 2. And that was someone who did come to 8 o'clock. Someone else wrote in that they liked morning prayer. St. Thomas Church is my favorite church. I like starting my week by coming here. I don't think that the vestibule should be so loud before worship, and I don't think the choir should be rehearsing prior to the service in the church. And finally, under circled items, I've pretty much covered those. When someone wrote, under multi-generational worship, someone wrote, depends on how generational. Too young or disruptive. So what do we do with all this? In an ideal world, hold your seats. I think we'd look at moving to an 8, a 9 o'clock, and a 10:45 or 11 format. Why? Part of the biggest driving reason is Michael Smith is doing an outstanding job with music, but he can only serve at one service right now. You can't have him in two places because he's rehearsing the choir from 9 to 10 when we're holding the family table. Today we had over 50 in there, lots and lots of small children. But he's not able to create a choir out of them, and that's the ground floor to getting them into our music program. If you're not aware of this, we've grown from 3 children in the chorister program when Michael started to 20 6 months later, and we have 5 in the Joyful Noise choir. So that would be an ideal thing if we could pull that off. Right now, it's a little bit like having Carson Wentz as your quarterback, but he can only play the second half of every game. Would you want to have that issue on your team if you could only allow him to quarterback twice, in the second half of the game? I also believe that the music program is really in many ways the future of our church. We're a church that cannot afford to have a low participatory music program, especially with children and youth. I've seen over and over again that one of the greatest ways to keep children and especially youth involved in worship is give them a role and to have them sing. They rehearse, they lead, no one sits on the bench, they learn life skills, and they appropriate the music deep within and the teachings about Scripture from where it comes from. I think if we're going to flourish as a church over the next decade or two, that's the number one thing we can build upon. Combined Christian Ed Hour will be another reason. Right now, if you're not aware of it, as you probably just saw just a minute ago, no one's hands went up that came from the family table. That group's all off the campus by the time we do these forums. People say, I don't like it to be segregated, I miss it being multi-generational. I do think it would be a real struggle to get these young families to attend our 10 o'clock service as it is. Number one concern, just too long. The attention span of a child 6 and under is too small to handle that. And to have them, so we could do children's homilies every Sunday, and then have a larger homily, we have children go out, but I think what we've got is a very winning combination right now. But then they do their Christian Ed after. There's nothing available for the adults now who attend that service afterwards except kind of coffee and conversation. Next year we're hoping to start a gallery for them. They've said to us they don't want so much speakers, they want to discuss topics that are very relevant in their daily life. And they're probably topics that are somewhat different from the topics that might be of interest to folks here, because it's principally about raising young children and having a family at that point that they've said are their big focus. We've heard a bit about mixing the congregations. So one of the things we're looking at doing next year is holding up to 5 services where we have one big combined service. So a kickoff service, an end of the year service, a time when the bishop visits service, an Epiphany pageant service, an All Saints Sunday service, where all of us, not the 8 o'clock, but at least the family table and the 10 o'clock service, are combined in a worship service together. And part of that, too, is when we have a breakfast after this, there's nothing for the folks at the family table. Now, they were told last time that they could come in and have some cereal, but nothing was prepared for that. And it's hard for the Hospitality Commission, very hard to be running staggered meals. But we want them to feel very much a part of everything, including the annual meeting, to be part of that. Transitioning members from that service to the main service has been hugely difficult for us. When Pastor Bill led that service for 15 years, we had a significant, very significant drop-off rate. After they concluded their time in what we used to call first steps to worship, they did not transition up into the main worship. And we're hoping with the development of our chorister program, our own clergy being in there every Sunday, getting to know those families, and then making sure we find roles for them at the 10 o'clock service, that we will have a much stronger rate of retaining them as they move in and stay with us at St. Thomas. But it's still going to be a transition without a strong Christian Ed program for them, where they can come to adults and children. And then the question is, if we were to go to an 8, 9, and say 10:45 or 11 o'clock service, would those young families then find themselves with sports conflicts that start at 11 or 11:15 somewhere? That could be a potential issue. So one thing we're going to explore for the coming year is possibly if we can get a reliable priest who can be here with us on Sundays, is to have concurrent services. And that would allow us to start the family table and the main service in the church at the same time. And when they finish, we can start our Christian Ed, or the family table may start 15 minutes later because it's a shorter service. But then we could all come down and gather here for spiritual formation. Would that be the right time for these young families with the children? I think for the younger children would work. For students, once they get into the sports leagues, I'm not sure that will work. So these are some things we're investigating. And I want to just open it up to questions. I wish I could tell you this is the exact way we're going starting the fall. But we are committed to doing 5 all-parish worship events during the coming year. We think that will be very successful and helpful and bridge some of the gap. Stroud, you had your hand up.
Right, so from the results of the survey, everything seems like it's going, for the most part, very smoothly, except for the challenge that you're addressing right now is the intergenerational aspect. And so I guess my question is, how many people that attend 10 o'clock, for example, really want to see children there? You don't have to answer this because my kid's sitting right here. But, do they really want that? The second thing is, the people who are doing the family table, who have young children, you're talking about a difficulty in transitioning. It seems like part of that difficulty in transitioning isn't just what role will their kids have moving into a 10 o'clock service, but now it's like starting all over. I don't know anybody. I'm moving from this service, and it's like a completely different church, just happens to be on the same location. And so I think it's critical that whatever direction you take in doing this, that the parents at the family table have the opportunity to be amongst us on a regular basis. And just personally, I don't think 5 times a year is going to do that. You get to a point where they don't want a longer service. That you combine those services 5 times a year, it's going to be a longer service. The bishop comes, that's going to be a longer service, right? And for the same reason they don't want to take a longer service now, what makes us think that they're going to want to do it 5 times out of the year? So.
Right. Well, you raise a lot of great issues. Almost every, it's like chess moves, and every time you look at one, it's got its pros and cons. One of the big issues is space. It's a completely different space in the church, much darker, much more formal, kind of rigid. If a child got up and kind of ran around, people say, hey, can't you control that child? You're not parenting effectively.
Would they? That's the question.
And then you mentioned knowing people. That's a very significant one. The length of service is a huge gap. To go from the first step, the family table now is running about 35 to 40 minutes, sometimes 45. But to go to an hour is a significant jump. And then the sermon focus. Today's sermon is radically different in the pulpit than it was down in the family table where I gave a children's homily with props and things like that. So one of the things we may have to look at, can we grow the kind of age range for the family table? Because to go from, we designed it for 6 and under, and I've said, look, let's make that a softer upper cap. And we'll have people with children 7, 8, and even 10 years old attend the family table, and we've had over the years, where people say, we're just, we love it here, we're just not ready quite to go up there. I think if we could make that more up to 10 or 12, then the transition from there to the big church would be a lot easier. We're also looking at, as more and more cursors are in the main service, we're going to see, children see icons up there, and, leading worship and say, gosh, this feels like it could be a place for me too. Barbara.
I remember 11:15 service that we had for many, many years. And I believe you dispensed of that when you came because it was just getting smaller and smaller, and it was mostly the senior population. Is there a concern if we were to go to a 10:45 or an 11 that let's say the 40 to 60-year-olds would peel off?
It is a concern. I mean, I think that the only way to make that work is music. That you'd have to have chorus or singing at least every other Sunday, bringing young families in there. We found that that service became more passive and that less people singing in the pew, and as it became less attended, if you and I are, if you're the closest person to me, I'm going to hear myself singing way too much. So I mean, not sing, sing very quietly. We want to have critical mass. The studies now say if you don't fill a sanctuary 50%, no matter how good your offering is, people are saying, well, if this is good, why aren't more people here? That's not a question you want going on in people's minds. And it loses energy. Young families often will visit the last service of the day. And so they'd come and see that, and they'll grant say, gosh, I don't see anyone in our age range here. If we were to do that, we'd have to have a choristry program very strong, ready to help us go into that. Yeah.
Mayor, would Sunday school address Stroud's issue and the timing of Sunday school where you're getting the little kids? We were just talking about that at the women's retreat this weekend.
Right.
We remember teaching kindergartners, first graders, and so children go to, do you understand what I'm saying?
During the service.
Yeah, like during the service, so that the parents feel, I don't know.
Yeah, we've always tried to opt to have children in worship here, and that's been kind of a national movement over the last few decades, rather than good.
And that's fine, but say that the parents, all parents and all of us could gather here, and the kids go off to Sunday school. It seems to me we did that at some point.
Right, I mean, that if we were to go back to a model of having, well, we could even do this with concurrent services. We could do it if we went to 8, 9, and 11 or 10:45. We could do it if we moved the family table up to, say, 10 or 10 and 15, where then we'd have Sunday school right afterwards for all ages. We're strongly thinking of that. Might let it come to me.
I just throw, another option in there, which also, like Merrick says, each one of these is a chess move that has pros and cons. But if we did go to a concurrent service, say 10 o'clock and or 10:15, you could do formation before, whether it's adult forum and Sunday school, but we're also hearing from family table families, it's really hard for them to get here with young kids, that early, so.
Right. Let me also mention, if we do concurrent services, it means that Liz would be leading the main service on one Sunday, I'd be down leading the family table. So you wouldn't see me until you came down to Christian Ed, and vice versa the following week.
And then what's Michael doing?
Michael, that would not get more use out of Michael. No, so it would save this group from having to start worship later. The vast majority of the year, I think, worship at 10 o'clock. It would save you from having to start your worship at 10:45 to 11, but it wouldn't give Michael more access to these congregations.
We do have a skilled musician in family table
Right.
though, so there are other resources that support it.
And this summer, I've asked Michael to explore looking at the possibility of starting a midweek joyful noise choir. Why? Because Michael will have a chance to be in the family table as long as he's not away on vacation during the summer, because he will not have to leave the choir before the 10 o'clock service. So he'll have some access in there, and we'll see where we go with that. Other questions or thoughts? Josh?
As a child, I attended the Church of the Messiah, and we had a wonderful service in the old chapel, the older church there, and it was only children. Maybe it's a free range issue or whatever, but the parents would drop off the kids, and it would be a Eucharist just for kids only. No parents, no nothing. The parents would have a concurrent service and then would pick up the kids for Sunday school. I thought it was tremendous. It worked very, very well. Then we were forced to go to the 9:30 service, a concurrent, everybody, one-size-fits-all service in the large new church, the Church of the Messiah. And I can remember being totally turned off by it. It was way too long. You feel lightheaded, you kneel for so long. So I believe it may be neat for us to want kids around, but I don't think the kids want us. And kids don't want a long, boring service. They want their own thing. Just from childhood memories, I'm speaking as a...
We are doing everything possible to nurture children and youth here, and I say that because, and I want anyone to feel, well, I'm not you know, I'm in my 70s now, or 80s, or 60s, and I'm not hearing you talk about focus on me. The most precarious numbers we have here are others. In terms of if they say to their parents, this is so boring, I get nothing out of this, and the parent can't say, well, no, I see you getting lots out of this. They stop coming, and then there will be no future in our
Right,
church.
right.
So we're trying to be very focused. This is a national issue in every church, and I think we're doing well with it really now. And we can even strengthen that, and we are strengthening it with each year. So thank you for coming, Connie, and then Tom.
Well, actually, if you look at our congregation answer, 58% are over 60. Children aren't so important because they're dealing with grandchildren, not their own children.
Yeah, I think statistically we're definitely an older congregation. But in terms of around the diocese, I think we have one of the brighter futures, but we want it to be even brighter. In other words, most Episcopal churches in this diocese no longer have Sunday school. They just
What
don't.
you're talking about,
What?
and then you want to attract more younger parents that have children they'll bring.
Right.
I mean, I'm an old man, but bringing children to church or Sunday school or whatever has got no interest
No interest
in me.
to you.
No.
And it's, you know, so part of what we need to do, and part of what I need to do in leadership is, it's not a democracy. And I just say that because there was a church in our diocese that had about 10 people, all it was down to in terms of average Sunday attendance. And when asked if they could make some changes to try to turn the church around and save it by an interim rector, they said, we don't want you to change anything.
Oh my gosh.
So if it was democracy, you know, and then the person said, look, the church will have to close in a couple years. That's all right with us, but don't make any changes. That's not leadership. So when you come into that, so you sometimes have to make a leadership move for the long run, for what you think will benefit the congregation as a whole. Even if, let's say, most people said, I don't have children here anymore, I don't want to go in that direction. But again, we're just trying to discern this and try to do, we don't want to go in ways that will unnecessarily challenge the congregation. All we want to do is things that will continue to bless the congregation. But it may not be comfortable with every single person attending. Connie and then Deb.
You know, I think I'm hearing a dichotomy in what you're saying when you consider adding younger children to the main service. Let me just say the 10 o'clock service as it stands now, because the greater percent of your congregation is people who are older. People who are older have more trouble hearing. We've already talked about the audio system, and you wind up with a lot of small children moving around or making sounds. That means that the congregation that normally attends that service will feel less comfortable because they are being distracted by younger voices. And it is distracting. I'm just saying, it seems to me that that might be not so well liked.
Well, you remember the comment that someone said under multi-generational worship, they wrote, depends on how generational.
Right.
Too young are disruptive.
Right.
So I hear what you're saying, and to be honest, I totally get that. That's why the family table takes that issue out. Now, some people say, look, I went to that, that's not the way I want to raise my children. We sit, look at the Hillbushers, sit in the front row. Grace filled out the worship challenge card. Not her parents, but Grace.
Thank you.
And, but they're here all the time, and thank you for being here all the time. But Grace is just great in worship. And Morgan's great when she's here. There's some families that have raised their children. I look at the writers that raised their children in the main worship service and just love that. It's worked for many people. But for others, that would be highly disruptive if we had there was a child who I thought was kind of more challenging today in the family table. Could have been very disruptive in the main worship. So I think that takes the edge off of that, if you hear what I'm saying.
I want to say, within our corporate life, we have been members of many churches. both Lutheran, Moravian, Episcopalian, and I have to say that this church, of the many that we've attended, has had the absolute best adult forums that I have seen anywhere, and that's a lot of years. And I walk out some Sundays and say, why weren't there more people here? This is tremendous.
Well, thank you for saying that, raising that issue, and to that effect, please do write topics of interest to you down there. I do a lot of the work on selecting these speakers and topics, but a couple of things is, this year I want to engage the Adult Spiritual Formation Commission more in that conversation. We want to engage you more in that, because I can't, go into some ivory tower and just pick out, this is the topic I think will really excite everyone. And the more participatory that decision-making is, for instance, Liz's husband, Joe, is coming to speak soon, and he's going to be talking on science and religion, a topic that's quite a bit of interest to many people. Steve Treat's coming next week, one of our best-loved speakers that we've ever had here. Rabbi Marks is coming in February, another, perhaps the best loved of all our outside speakers. But we want to hear your thoughts about speakers and topics of interest to you. And when we get the topics, then we can try to marry up with someone who we think would address that well. We're going to have more of our own people leading some forums and kicking it off for 10 or 15 minutes and then opening up more to discussion around the tables. That won't work so well with bringing in a top speaker, because I guarantee I'll hear the feedback. You brought this person in from New York, you gave them 15 minutes, and then they get on the table, and I wanted to hear more from that person. So it's always a balance. And if you have suggested speakers to go with the topic, please let us know that. Deb Buck had a comment.
I just wonder if you have your one family service a month where your First Table people come up for that service, and maybe it's a children's sermon, where the kids come down front, to make them more feeling inclusive than,
I mean, that's a thought. I think we have to take some incremental steps to this to make, there's something, first of all, in the family table, we don't get the same families all the time. So my hunch is we have about 100 people regularly participating, but on any Sunday, we have 50 to 60 down there at this point. But it's not the same 50 or 60. And so if you took away one of those Sundays that they could even be here, they're wondering, oh, is this a Sunday I'm supposed to be here or there? It's a little issue, but it's something that we could consider doing. I think having choristers go up there and be very familiar and being in that space, I think that's going to be probably the best bridge that we can build. Michael?
I'll just add that it's important to remember for the family table people, at this point, that service is so well established that their identity as a worshiping community who care for each other, who worship together, is as firm and established as some of ours is for the 10 a.m. service. So constantly changing it up too much might be something that they view as disruptive. They themselves have asked for the opportunity to have joint worship a few times a year, and I think that's really promising that they want to also be involved in the whole life of the church, but it's a balance.
And we're finding a number of the parents out there are very bright people. We're going to try to get them involved in vestry commissions and more active in service, because then they move from saying we go to St. Thomas to we belong to St. Thomas. I'm now on the Buildings and Hardscapes Committee or the Pastoral Care Commission. I represent St. Thomas. Beverly.
Have the parents of the family table kids been surveyed? It would be a very different survey than this. But, the goal of those families is to keep their children until they're 25 at the family table.
Right.
The goal is to sort of graduate, because the big church is where they will spend their lives.
I totally agree. They have been surveyed. They filled this out. Your comments were connected. I think that we may need to do a more specific survey just geared towards that group, because they don't even know what the forum is. The vast majority of them have never come here, and with their interest on adult spiritual formation, I think would be significantly different. We need to have probably some more open-ended questions on that. And as I said before, and I felt this for a number of years, I think we have to grow that age range, probably up to, remember, do some of you remember Second Steps to Worship?
Yeah.
That was very successful. The challenge is we only have so many clergy, so many musicians, and to have some kind of, the music there was so different that there wasn't fostering people going to the choristry program. There are only so many ways you can make things work. but to have something that's a little more like first steps and second steps combined, I think that if we can grow in that direction, it'll help us a lot, because the gap to go from being 7 into there, that's a big gap, because the sermons, the music, the lessons, I mean, when we read a lesson family table, it's from a storybook. Sometimes we'll read a short passage right from Scripture, but it's more the storytelling. The gap from a 7-year-old to what we're offering in there, I think is still way too long. Any other thoughts or questions for Will?
Yeah, sometimes it seems almost like a consumer mentality of what can the church do for me, you know, whether I'm older or whether I'm younger. And I'm wondering how we can focus on discipleship training in terms of looking out for each other, so that the young people would see a sense of ownership in reaching out to the needs of older congregants. So things like volume levels, and kind of tapping in. And likewise, older generations being more involved in children's ministry instead of it being the work of 30-somethings.
I think that's a vital comment, and I hope Eric had a chance to hear that in the back, and Emily Given and others, that yeah, there's a level of Christian maturity where you say, I'm here to serve, versus I'll come as long as I'm getting something out of this myself. And I think that when we do get to a strong level of Christian maturity, we're thinking, Lord, use me today to bring joy to someone when I get to church. Help someone who's going through a difficult time to be seated next to me, versus I sure as heck hope I get my pew. So things like that, it's a transformation. And it includes people saying, do you need a Sunday school teacher? Would you be willing to consider me at my age? I know I'm not a young parent anymore, but I've raised children and I've loved it, and I miss being with them. I would be glad to teach Sunday school. So that for all ages to be thinking like that, how can I be there for others? Great point, because this is not about consumer satisfaction. That is not what Christianity should be. At the same time, we also know that we're in the ultimate service industry, and we have to serve people. And tell all our staff, we're there to serve. Respond to phone calls promptly, try to respond to all emails promptly, try to be there to care for our people, especially in an emergency or crisis. And everyone, to try to, one of the things I've heard time and time again is the sense of community that's been fostered here. I went and brought communion to Elisa Marshall and Michael Carr on Friday, and Elisa's just recovering from surgery, and she's going to be going through some follow-up treatments and things. And she said, and Michael said, several times through my visit with them, how much this community has been there for them. And I think that gives accolades to everyone in this room. How we surround each other with love, and concern, and prayer, and know this is my go-to community. So that's what we're always thinking about, that in terms of where we have worship and all, so that we are creating these communities that are go-to communities for the folks here. One size won't fit all, one hour will not fit all, one hymn will not work for all, one sermon will not capture a 292-year-old's attention span. But we're trying to build this sense of community. I think we've made tremendous progress on that, and it's because of the people here. You've done a great job with that. I want to just honor our time, but I think we ought to wind it up now. You've been great to be out here today. We appreciate all the attendance. It's been really well attended this morning. I think you have a heart for this. And I thank you for the leaders in the church, and we will continue to try to get as right as we can. Feel free to send us emails or call us, take us to lunch, be with us, have coffee. We want to hear from you, please.
There's a basket at the back if you want to put your cards and pencils in that.
Have a blessed day, and remember, go Eagles! Yeah.